Hey everybody, it's Fraser here. I hope you guys are doing well. This video is on regret and how to power through that. Of course, regret is sort of a quasi-feeling, state of mind where you're looking back in the past and having regret over something you've done, something you haven't done, and you've created a narrative that isn't useful for moving forward in the future. This is an issue that I have almost on a daily basis, and I've gotten to the point now where I've sort of, to an extent, mastered that, and I've mastered that in two ways. And by mastered, I mean I've mitigated it. I'm able to, if I have that feeling of, thinking of, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that, or my life would have been better if I had done X, those kind of thoughts, I'm able to clear those pretty quick. And so the way I've done that, and learn, this is not an easy process, but it's taken me years to do this, but now I'm at the point where I'm pretty good, is I have a two-step process. One is kind of a stoic kind of concept where I go, the outcomes are out of my control. You don't know if things are good or bad until the final accounting anyways. And then it's sort of a reframe of things being positive or useful. And the second being how to make decisions now in the moment in a positive light, and also being able to forgive yourself or give yourself some clemency on those thoughts that you have. So those are kind of the main principles or the main techniques that I use, and we'll go through them. So the first one is you don't control outcomes, which again is a sort of a Stoic principle. You'll find it's other philosophies as well, but I'm pulling from sort of a Roman era Stoic kind of model in this. And I think that's true from sort of front to back. So regardless of what you've done, what you do in the moment, in the future, and what you've done in the past, the outcomes were always out of your control. And you can see this from the macro, and you can scale it down to the micro. I think it's sort of axiomatic truth. So, do you control the outside environment around you? Answer is no, right? Do you control the moon, the stars, the planets? Answer is no. Do you even control your own health? Like, do you control where you're born? Do you control when you're hungry? Do you control who you like or who you're attracted to, right? Like, at a certain level, you really don't have much control of anything in regards to outcomes. So that's the first thing that I'll use to inject into my brain to go, something that happened back in the day, did I have control over the outcomes? Would I have gotten hit by that bus or not? Like those kind of thoughts. That's the first thing to sort of start to reframe myself. The second thing that I find is useful is that you never know if an outcome is good or bad until the final accounting anyways. So I'll give you a good example of that, or the concept would be that what happened to you, you might perceive as good or bad, but that's a subjective viewing of it, and maybe that leads to something positive. So a classic example would be, your parent gets hit by a drunk driver and is killed. You become a police officer to stop people from doing that, and your outcome is that negative event actually leads to flourishing for you in some context, or you break up with your girlfriend or boyfriend and you find the person you're meant to be with, or whatever the case. Insert your own narrative there. But for me personally, I've got good examples of this where, again, your how you perceive events in the past are not accurate to what they actually were. We only have a certain amount of senses, and from a phenomenological point of view, or from a point of view of like the ability to interpret information coming in, we're very hyper narrow and very focused to the wider world around us. So if you have a negative viewing of your past, it's likely that you're viewing it from a very specific narrative that you have almost self-generated. But you can turn that to be a positive. So for example, when I was in university, I played football there, and football was definitely number one. School was number two. I got good marks, but I didn't try as hard as I could, and I've always been conscientious. And at the time, I kind of hid that. I never told anyone that I was not trying my best. I still did well, but I didn't put in my absolute maximum effort, which is my normal kind of go-to. And I remember I walked across the stage to get my degree, and my sweet mother was in the stage with my parents and family and stuff, and they were all clapping for me or whatever. And I looked at my mom, and she's wicked smart, like melt the paint off the walls smart, and it's very conscientious, just a grinder. Same with my dad. But I remember looking at my mom in the eyes, and she was super proud of me because her son's got a degree or fancy piece of paper or whatever. The utility of that paper is doubtful at best. But the point was that I was like, oh, I had this huge pain of regret because I was like, man, I didn't try my best. My mom thinks I maybe did, or she's proud of me, but she really shouldn't because I only gave it a decent run. And so from that point, I could have either been like, man, like this is a negative event, but I flipped that into a positive. So now I view that as almost a foundational moment for me, because from that point, if I'm in something, I'm all in. And that has led to good outcomes later on. So you never know if something's good or bad, but I can tell you at that moment, I was like feeling bad for a couple of days about that, and just kind of feeling meh. And eventually I was like, let's pivot this, let's change the narrative to make it something useful. And this applies to pretty much every event you can have. You can twist this into an opportunity. You can twist it into a negative or positive, anything in the past. So that's how you get over the regret kind of component from a Stoic perspective. The second component of that is, what do you do in the future? So like how do you now move from a place of like, I should have done X? How do we get from the position that you've created a negative narrative, and how do we move forward with it? And the way I do that is sort of based on sort of an existentialist principle, which is that you have to live a life or make decisions in the moment that justify the suffering that might occur looking back or maybe in the future. So this applies to regret and the feelings of I should have done, or if only but X, if my father wasn't an alcoholic, I'd be successful. But again, back to the Stoic principle, the next person beside you might be like, my father was an alcoholic, look how successful I am, like how that framed me. So the victim narrative here isn't at all. You have to take responsibility, and that's the second point. So how do we move from the moment now forward? So the first thing that I do is I will accept responsibility for the things that have happened to me in the past, and I will give myself clemency or forgiveness for those things that have occurred. So if people have burnt me, I forgive them. And it's 1,000 pounds off my shoulders every time I do this. If this is the doom loop I'm spiraling down, I will own every decision I've made in the past, and I'll go essentially apply my Stoic principles and going, the outcomes are out of my control. Whether I did my best is immaterial. It's what can I do now? So I own everything up to the current moment, and then I own the decision moving forward. Tied with, I forgive all the sort of negative narratives I've created, which again are self-generated. Like another person who views your narrative might view it positively. It's all subjective to you. So you have a choice to keep that negative narrative that drags you down or limits your potential, or you can reframe it. A good analogy, I think it was an Alan Watts video, I saw this years ago, but it stuck with me, was if you have an orange and you squeeze it, it'll always be orange juice coming out, right? Like it'll never not be orange juice. But with a human being, if you squeeze the human being, like maybe poison comes out, and you're like, why is that? Because the orange doesn't have a choice to pick what is in it. It's just an orange. But a human being in its psyche has the choice to insert a negative viewing or a negative poisonous narrative or a positive one. So when you are being squeezed, is it orange juice coming out, or is it poison? And it's a stupid analogy, but that sort of that hits for me sometimes. And often I will have this kind of like, the world is squeezing me, and I'm not getting exactly what I want or whatever. I'm going down that rabbit hole. Often I will think, am I viewing my past, if that's the kind of thing I'm viewing, I should have done this, I should have been a movie star or whatever. If I'm viewing my past from that negative lens, one, have I forgiven? I need to own that. And then am I viewing this from a really negative lens? And if I am, often I'll just be like, I forgive myself for viewing it that way. I own all the responsibility for all the things that happened in the past, and I believe that to my core. And then also, I'm willing to move forward with a positive lens. So, and that usually just that technique there, instantly I'm seeing the world better. If I look at a tree, I'm like, wow, it's so beautiful. And I'm having sort of like a happy moment, and that just carries me through. So from there, that's how you deal with the past. Now you're in the moment. Where do you go from here to not repeat the mistakes of having that I should. So for me, it's about, if you can make one good decision after another, that's the right decision for you, again, subjectively based on your personal individual context, then you can't have regret on the outcome, which again, you don't control, if the decision you made in the moment is correct, right? So for me, I apply two things. One, at the micro, I'll actually create like a schedule. So I'll go, what is a day that's worth living for me tomorrow? And this is just like at night or in the morning or whenever you get a chance. I'll just scribble out, I need to work out, I need to eat good food, I need to say hi to friends or whatever. You just create a schedule that looks good to you. And I go, if I died at the end of this day, was the schedule good? And of course, you don't want to live every day like it's your last, in the context that, you don't want to go to Vegas and blow your money right away, because you might live for 40 years. So it's based on like where I think I'm going to be in my personal context. But almost every time I do that process, which I try to almost every day, I hit the pillow, I put my head on it. Even if I don't hit all those goals, because again, the outcome's out of your control. If there's a hurricane or an earthquake or something like that, that's going to change your schedule rapidly. But just creating that framework, being like, at least I've made the decision to do it. That is enough. Because again, did I make the right decision in the moment right now? So that's kind of like the micro level. And then what informs that, what I put on that page, and for like the long term, is making decisions or applying a vision to my life that justifies the suffering. So for me, that'll be like my ultimate kind of calling, whatever that is. Again, it's subjective. So it can be like, having a family, getting out of jail, getting a PhD, being an astronaut. It's whatever it's up for you. Whatever that ultimate vision of you is, and I'm kind of pulling from like existentialism and local therapy here, and maybe a bit of phenomenology, but this is kind of where it's coming from. It applies in all scenarios, whether you're in poor or rich, in a place of suffering, hellscape, or in a really sort of positive, happy Disneyland kind of paradise, utopia. You need to justify the inevitable negative things that will happen to you. Again, like the feelings of regret, by making the right decision. And the right decision to me is the ultimate vision of what you perceive in your life that you want, or not that you want, that you're obligated to do. So you have an obligation to live life maximally and maximize your potential, which is in some cases, only limited by the physics around you. You have unlimited capacity to move through space and create things that wouldn't have been there in the first place. So that again is up to you individually. For me, it's even like making a YouTube clip on this topic, right? Like that's something that I feel like is worth my time. And so I'm just going to maximally pursue that. Whether the video works or anyone sees it or anyone cares is immaterial, because it's the right decision in the moment. Now, of course, the ultimate vision of your life will adjust based on your context and the time in which you live, and where you are, and are you in a war zone or not. It's going to change your perspective, and things will change. But essentially, if you think about this, if you make a right decision one after another, how can you have regret later on? Because at the moment, it was the right decision to make. The outcome's out of your control. And then when something good happens, you go, fantastic, that's great. And when something bad, again, you don't know if it's good or bad till the final accounting way down the line anyways. Maybe it's a defining moment in your life in a positive way later on. But even if it's bad, like you're on your deathbed, you get cancer, you're gonna die, you won't be on your deathbed going, I made bad decisions. You'll be like, wow, I made good decisions from today onwards, the whole way through. I have zero regrets, because again, I can't control the world around me outside of my own decision-making process. So then you're good to go. So just again to recap, the first bit is, one, we don't control outcomes, which is relieving, right? You don't own the people around you. They're going to do what they're going to do. You don't own the environment around you. You don't even own your own body to an extent, right? If you got cancer, you got cancer. It is what it is. So you don't control that. So just give that up, and that's relieving just on its own case. You don't know if something's good or bad until the final accounting, one way or the other. And the good and bad is subjective. So you control the narrative of whether you view things good or bad. Again, like if you have an abusive parent or you're from an abusive childhood, there's many different ways to view that. But in the world, you'll find people who have been wildly successful with that background, and people who have not been wildly successful. And if you are making excuses for where you are now and not owning that event and forgiving yourself and others for, let's say, past pain, then if you turn it into an excuse, you will not flourish the way you could. So that's I guess the second or third point, which is in the sort of owning responsibility for what has occurred, releasing all that kind of like open wounds, let's say. If you cut yourself, you put a Band-Aid on it. But if you have a psychological wound of coming from regret, often people will, and this is me, people just sit with it, with an open wound, and let it bleed for years, right? Like close up that wound. Give yourself the opportunity to forgive yourself and forgive others. Own your context, own your current moment, and then move forward by, in this case, I create like a little daily sheet. But for the ultimate macro vision of your life, whatever that is, I want to have kids, I want to be healthy, I want to, be the best person I can be, keep it relatively broad. It's whatever you see, it's whatever your subconscious gives to you in a vision, in a dream. Follow your dreams, right? Whatever that ultimate dream or vision is, as long as you move generically towards that, and it's the right decision every day. Again, this isn't, not every minute, but like, your general thrust of your life is towards the vision that justifies your life. And I think you have a responsibility to do this, by the way. It's not just you by yourself, it's all of us together. So if I don't maximize my potential, I'm not being a good person in my community to the extent that I could be, right? So I have an obligation, I feel a personal, moral, and ethical obligation to maximize myself and be the best person I can be, not just for myself, but for others. And that's a component as well. But the key bit there is that you have that vision, you pursue it, and then from that moment, if you magically could just do that every moment of every day, you would have zero regret. And so that's a way to own your situation, ground yourself in the moment, create that kind of vision or pursue that vision, even if it's a millimeter a day or just generally just point in that direction, as long as you kind of action that to an extent, then you're, this works for me, I feel like I'm pretty good. So if I were to get a terminal cancer diagnosis, I would cry, for sure, I'd be sad, but then I don't think I would have that painful feeling of regret, which is something that I've had for years and years and years. It's taken me a long time to fix that. And I think everyone gets this. This is super common. Everyone I talk to has lots of regrets. And it's just the ability for you to reframe those things into a narrative that is useful for you is not technically hard to do from a conceptual sense, but it's very difficult to implement. So work on that. It took me years to get to the point where I can clear that slate and move forward effectively. So that's all I got. I hope that wasn't too complex. That's just sort of a peek into my mind. There are other ways to come at this topic, but that's just what's working for me right now. And I'll probably do more videos on sort of different esoteric frameworks, maybe some from a more like theological perspective, things like that. But that's it for right now. Hope you have a great day and talk soon.